It's here. It's Ohio State week, and Notre Dame got off to a great start on Monday.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Tuesday, September 19th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer covering college football for Fox Sports. And today's episode of Locked On Irish is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. The everyday listeners know that on Tuesdays, my old co-host Luke Smith comes on to put the finishing touches on the game that just happened by going over everything we liked and didn't like from Saturday. And we'll do that today with the Central Michigan game, but we'll also look ahead to the big one on Saturday against Ohio State because, like most of you, that's where our minds have been at for basically the last 2 weeks. But Notre Dame also landed a commitment from their top quarterback target in the class of 2025 on Monday in four-star Deuce Knight. So we've got a lot to cover in this one, so let's get into it. All right, Luke Smith is back with me here, and before we get to our three things regarding the Central Michigan game, we got some big news on Monday that Notre Dame's top quarterback target in the class of 2025, four-star quarterback Deuce Knight out of Mississippi, announced his commitment to the Irish. What are your thoughts on Deuce and his potential for the Irish?
Obviously, very highly touted quarterback. Can't believe we're talking about the class of 2025 here because that puts that a full 10 years after I graduated high school, I guess. So I'm not really liking that. But yeah, I mean, I have some kind of mixed feelings about it. Obviously, he's a very talented kid. There's some red flags here for me, namely the fact that he went to Lipscomb Academy in Nashville for 3 games this year and then transferred back home to Mississippi. So is he even playing football this season?
Yeah, he's actually going back to his hometown, and he's just going to join the team midway through the season, either this week or next.
That's allowed? That's weird. But that is kind of a red flag to me. I know homesickness was cited as the reason for it. Well, Mississippi and South Bend isn't any closer. And in fact, I think I texted you when this news broke. I would love a statistical breakdown, not just how many players we've had from Mississippi, but how many students total at the University of Notre Dame have been from Mississippi, because I know exactly 0. So I'd be curious to see those figures. But yeah, I think you raised a good point to me earlier when we were talking about this. The fact of the matter is, and this can change obviously in the offseason, but right now as it stands, they have a lot of depth in that quarterback room with both CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey, at least, you know, when Deuce Knight will be on campus. So you can afford to kind of take a chance on a guy here that maybe has some star potential, and even if there are some potential red flags there, just surrounding everything else.
Yeah, the timing of it is pretty interesting because it's been pretty well reported at this point that Notre Dame was down to 2 quarterback prospects. He's either going to be Deuce Knight or Bear Bachmeier, and they were both visiting in back-to-back weekends, and it kind of seemed like whoever committed first was going to get that spot. Oddly enough, Bear was on campus this past weekend for his official visit, but Deuce, apparently, according to a report from Tom Loy from 24/7 Sports, had actually committed to the staff on Friday. And he wasn't even on campus yet. He's going to be visiting this weekend for the Notre Dame-Ohio State game. So that felt a little bit surprising, I would say. I'm not surprised that Deuce Knight committed to Notre Dame, but the fact that he did it today, or at least announced publicly that he was committed today, that was interesting. But to me, it does seem like the staff was a little bit higher on Deuce, just the way that, you know, things had been reported, the way that he was talked about, and the way that he was prioritized by the staff, especially in the spring when he was, you know, getting the walk with Marcus Freeman to practice. So I think they look at it as he probably has the higher ceiling. Bachmeier has probably a higher floor, but when you have 2 quality quarterbacks already in the room, although CJ Carr is not technically in the room yet, I think it's okay to take the guy who has this higher ceiling and who has a legit chance to be a superstar. But again, there are some red flags.
Yeah, and that kind of sucks for Bear. Like, I wonder how that visit went. I'm very curious. Like, was he made aware? Like, hey, by the way,
they had to have told him, right? Like, that'd be pretty messed up if they just let him go the whole weekend.
I think from all accounts, that kid Bear has been a Notre Dame fan his whole life. So yeah, that one's tough. But hey, that's, I guess, kind of the business a little bit. But you're right. Based on what we know, I have to believe that they kind of turned the screws on Deuce and said, hey, either shit or get off the pot, basically.
honestly, I would be like, hey, take them both. I don't know how that works with the scholarship numbers and all that, but I
Georgia's
would just
doing
say
it,
figure it
so,
out. Yeah.
why not?
Ohio State did it too. Just take
Yeah.
as many quarterbacks if you can. If Bear wants to come, I don't think you should turn him down. But for now, the quarterback prospect in that class is going to be Deuce Knight, and he's a very talented prospect. He is the number 5th ranked quarterback on the 24/7 Sports Composite, the number 70 player nationally. And I think we're in a good place when Notre Dame gets a top 100 quarterback and it's not unanimously approved by the entire community. Like, that just shows you a real significant improvement at quarterback recruiting over the last few years.
For sure. Yeah. And, maybe I should coach that a little bit in terms of the red flags. It's probably worth mentioning kid's 16 years old. So maybe homesickness is a real thing. When I see kids transferring high schools like that, my mind immediately goes to AAU basketball and just like the basketball prospects you see that go to like 5-6 high schools in 4 years. And I just, historically, it does not seem to end well. I'm not saying that's what this is, but that's just where my mind goes when I see something like that.
Yeah, if Deuce were playing basketball, this wouldn't even be news. It would be just par for the course. I mean, hell, Bear Alexander, the defensive tackle for USC, who just transferred from Georgia, I think he went to 5 different high schools. So
and he's got
maybe
some
this
problems.
yeah, and maybe this is becoming the norm, whether we like it or not. But let's move on to the Central Michigan game. You were there. You are boots on the ground like always. Give me the first thing you liked from that game.
Well, speaking of quarterbacks, having a quarterback, particularly after watching Justin Fields play for the Bears yesterday, it is so nice to have a team to root for that actually has a quarterback. The precision that Sam Hartman showed on deep balls to Merriweather, Tyree, and Flores is just something we haven't seen with any consistency or in some cases even at all from a Notre Dame quarterback in a long time. And I saw some commentary from Michael Bryan of 18 Stripes suggesting that this upcoming matchup with Ohio State is similar to the Georgia home and home, where the Irish are going to be at a talent disadvantage and the game's probably going to be low scoring, but if they play well, they'll be in it. And I agree. Obviously, Ohio State does have the talent advantage. They're probably clearly the most talented team Notre Dame's going to play all year. However, as Michael also pointed out, this time Notre Dame has the better quarterback, and I think that's going to be huge. Just having a guy who's able to make plays when you need them and can throw receivers open like we saw on Saturday. And I'd also like to point out, unlike 2017 Georgia, Notre Dame doesn't have Brandon Wimbush in this one, who Fields may actually have managed to look worse than yesterday. And for that reason alone, and Fields' association to Ohio State, I hope the Irish just smash the Buckeyes. And I want to like Justin Fields, but oh my God, that was so bad yesterday. That guy's not an NFL quarterback.
Wow, I did not realize we would be getting a Justin Fields analysis in this one, but I hear you. It was not a great weekend of quarterback play from all the ones I watched, with the exception of Sam Hartman, because I also watched Drew Pine for a little bit. God awful. Phil Dracovic, even worse. Actually, I don't know if it was worse, but it's still really bad.
It
and then
was
Tyler
worse.
Buckner. And then Tyler Buckner, not a great day from him either. Sam Hartman, much different story. It's like, as Pete Sampson pointed out in his article today with The Athletic, it's like he's playing a different position, and I would say maybe even a different sport than what those guys are playing right now. But to your point about having a quarterback being nice, I would say it's also very nice having an explosive offense, and Sam Hartman is a huge reason why this offense has been so explosive out of the gate. I'm going to put you on the spot real quick. Guess how many plays Notre Dame had of 40 or more yards last season?
I unfortunately saw this stat yesterday. It's 6, right? I think.
It is 6. That's pathetic, to be honest with you. This year, Notre Dame already has had 11 plays go for 40 or more yards, and it could have been 12 had Audric Estime's touchdown run not been called back. But that's where we are right now with this offense. Notre Dame has already basically doubled their amount of really explosive plays from last season, and we are just a third of the way through. Sam Hartman is a huge reason why we knew he could throw the deep ball. Now we're seeing it, and we really hadn't seen it that much up until that game against Central Michigan, but I'm really glad that we were able to see it then, because they're going to have to take some shots against Ohio State, and I'm glad that we've already seen it happen, and guys like Chris Tyree can make that catch, and he's already done it in a game, because going up against Ohio State, the pressure is going to be a little bit higher, the stakes are going to be higher, and there's only going to be a few of those opportunities where Notre Dame's going to have a chance to connect on, and so far, they've been really good at doing it.
They have, and going back to what I was just talking about there, like that's just not something we've seen with any consistency, or like I said, in some cases at all, from Notre Dame quarterbacks. And I think that, especially like you go back to that Clemson game in 2020 when Ian Book nails Avery Davis for the big pass play down the field. I know there have been some shots to Javon McKinley earlier in the game, but that was like shocking that happened, that they were able to pull that off. And Ian Book was a very good college quarterback, but now it's like, oh, this just seems so much easier. And I realized that you had to take into account the competition, but these are things that seem repeatable. And I think we're going to see that bear fruit as this season goes on.
That's a good point. That catch to Avery Davis, the fact that it was to him too, of all people, on the deep pass was really surprising in the moment. And that was the main criticism of Ian Book throughout his time. Can he push the ball downfield? We saw it in spurts. He just couldn't really do it consistently, but he did have some good deep throws. It wasn't like he was completely incapable of doing it like the guy we had last year. But to your point about Avery Davis, my second thing that I liked is actually Chris Tyree and what he has done, not just in the Central Michigan game, but throughout this season, because he has far exceeded my expectations at slot receiver. In camp, we'd kind of heard some things that were like the coaching staff was really high on him, and then the media would go to some open practices, and they were like, tough day for Chris Tyree. But so far this season, he's been really impressive and arguably the most reliable receiver Notre Dame has. He's third on the team in receptions with 8. He leads the team in receiving yards with 216. Granted, 76 of those came on one play. But as I said yesterday in the recap episode, that was a really difficult catch for any wide receiver, let alone a guy who has only been playing the position for a few months. So he's just a really reliable target, and I think he's maybe the most dynamic slot receiver we've had in a really long time. So really impressed with what he's done this season, and he's a great asset to the offense.
100%. That catch that he made was pretty much right in front of where I was sitting, or I guess even with where I was sitting. And even though it was a perfect ball by Sam Hartman, the concentration needed to haul that one in. It can't be understated. So I agree. It's nice that, listen, that guy was a huge recruit, and that he's found his niche in year 4 here and has kind of figured out a role for himself. So that's been good to see. Speaking of niches, I want to give a shout out to Jason Anye, because I noticed him constantly on Saturday, and I was thinking that during the game, and then later, while we take PFF grades with a grain of salt, he was Notre Dame's top overall defensive player rating wise on Saturday. And it's been nice to see that offseason hype wasn't just hype. Seeing some productivity there, just making plays along the defensive line, and I actually have some other questions about the defensive line that we'll get to later, but just seeing him have that type of performance, that was really good to see.
He was a force in the middle. Like, even if he's not racking up a bunch of tackles, he just sort of disrupts things on the line of scrimmage. And yeah, he's a very valuable asset. It's also encouraging that Notre Dame looks to be getting Gabe Rubio back this weekend as well. So even though there's been some concerns about the defensive line, we're seeing guys step up like a Jason Anye and a Javonte Jean-Baptiste too. I don't know if it felt that way in the game, but like, he was all over the field again after having a great game against NC State.
I agree. I thought he played really well once again, and it'll be interesting to see if he can leverage that into another really strong performance against his former team this Saturday. Yeah. I'm sure he's going to be motivated and ready to go. But speaking of guys who've had back-to-back really strong performances and also transfers, Thomas Harper, that hit that he had on that strip sack, which one of these days,
by you?
It was right in front of me. I could hear it, and I was, I don't know, probably 5 rows up or something like that. I was shocked the kid stayed in the game. It was about as clean and as textbook of a hit as you can have, but he got absolutely rocked. And one of these days, Notre Dame is actually going to pick up a fumble that they forced this year. I think they forced like 7, or they forced like 9 this year and haven't recovered any of them, which is insane. But he just brings a physicality at the nickel position that Notre Dame was desperately in need of, and he's been providing that big time.
I was thinking about this. When he committed to Notre Dame, do you remember much about like the reaction when it happened? Because it kind of snuck up on us.
No, and I'm trying to think when he did it. Did he do it around like...
It was right before Hartman.
Okay.
I think that might be part of it. We were all so preoccupied with whether or not Sam Hartman was going to transfer to Notre Dame that we this one got lost in the shuffle, and it's turned out to be the second most valuable transfer pickup, although Javonte Jean-Baptiste is obviously in contention for that as well. But wow, he has been a difference maker so far.
Yeah, and I think maybe also there's an element of, I think we knew that he had a shoulder issue coming in, so maybe just we didn't really know what to expect. But you're right. The expectation was not really there.
Yeah, and then he didn't participate at all in spring practice because he was nursing that shoulder injury. But he had a reputation coming into Notre Dame, we knew he liked to hit, and we're starting to
Mhm.
see that on display every Saturday because it wasn't just this game. It was against NC State as well. That dude is a violent football player.
Violent is a perfect word for it.
We'll be right back with Luke to talk more about Notre Dame's win over Central Michigan. But first, I want to tell you about Birddogs. I've raved about Birddog shorts before in the podcast, and I'm here to do it again because they are just that good. Not only do they make you look better, they're way more comfortable than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Birddogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches, so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. So not only can you wear these shorts to the gym, you could wear them on the golf course, out to lunch, really wherever you want. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege and you'll get a free water bottle at checkout. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and promo code LOCKEDONCollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Birddogs off, we promise you. Notre Dame's red zone defense has been really solid this year. I know the competition hasn't been great, but when you think about how bad it was last year, I mean, they literally had one of, if not the worst red zone defenses in all of college football. They ranked 130th nationally in red zone defense in scoring percentage, and then dead last in red zone touchdown defense. So if you got into the red zone against Notre Dame's defense last year, which to Al Golden and the defense's credit, they did prevent teams from getting in there a lot, but once they did, it was a touchdown practically every time. Al Golden was pretty confident that that would greatly improve this season and it would sort of improve towards the mean, but it's actually beyond that because as Tim Priester from Irish Illustrated pointed out in his Tale of the Tape, Notre Dame has only allowed 4 touchdowns out of 12 red zone penetrations, and that is tied for 9th in the country right now. They'll get a big test this weekend against Ohio State, but still just great to see that actually improve this season, and we're starting to see it every week.
Yeah, I mean, the law of averages would make you believe that it had to improve, but this pretty much just the massive jump that's obviously showed that there has been an emphasis put on it, and that's been good to see.
Yeah, and that was on display again on Saturday. But that's all the things we liked. I think we have to shift over to what we didn't like now. What stuck out to you?
So even though I did give Jason Anye a shout out, and like you said, and I said, I thought JJB played very well. I'm a little nervous about the lack of production from the Irish defensive line. The Notre Dame defense currently ranks 118th in the country in tackles for loss per game. That's not good, and it's simply not going to cut it against Ohio State. You know that Howard Cross is always going to be consistent, and hopefully getting Gabe Rubio back this week should help. However, the Riley Mills that played against NC State needs to show up every week, and especially this week against Ohio State. I know that sacks aren't everything, and especially in that NC State game, you saw instances where they just flushed Brendan Armstrong out of the pocket and forced him to, throw the ball away or rush throws. But I felt that the backup for CMU just had too much time way too often this week, and that's just not going to fly against Ohio State. That makes me nervous. And like I said, I know sacks aren't everything. You can get pressure on the quarterback, but I want to see Kyle McCord go down 3 or 4 times this week.
Yeah, it's one of those things, kind of like last year when Notre Dame didn't create a turnover until the North Carolina game, and it felt like they were so close on multiple instances. And then once it happened once, it started to come in bunches. Maybe that happens with the sacks because Notre Dame has gotten pressure. It is interesting kind of how they utilize different guys like Jalen Sneed and Maris Leofau. Like Maris Leofau wasn't blitzing the quarterback as much in this game as he had done in weeks prior. I do think that Al Golden and the Notre Dame defensive staff are saving some of those exotic looks for this weekend. And I do think that they're going to sort of break through to an extent and start to bring down the quarterback with the ball in his hand.
I hope so, yeah. I mean, the late hits are something, too. Even though I don't really agree with all of them, particularly the Burnham one from this past weekend. But, yeah, there's something.
All right, what else didn't you like from Saturday?
I gotta stay on the defensive side of the ball here. The tackling, I think they were marked for 10 missed tackles. It felt like a lot more, and I'm not even sure that it counts for just straight up whiffs by Antonio Carter and Jalen Sneed on some pretty well called plays by Al Golden. They just basically took the wrong angle or didn't play their assignments, and I think that's really where you saw missing both JD Bertrand and DJ Brown shown through. It was sloppy, and the tackling was not good. I had a guy around me who this was actually kind of annoying me. He kept saying pretty much anytime Notre Dame did anything, even when they would have like a positive play, like that's not going to work against Ohio State. In this particular instance, he was right. They need to tackle, but this was like, are you kidding me, man? Like they just had an 8-yard run. Relax. But I don't know. The negativity in Notre Dame Stadium is a common theme.
Yeah.
But yes, to get back to the point, the missed tackles, it can't be a thing.
Nope, the missed tackles can't be a thing. The penalties can't be a thing. And I think it will improve. It is kind of funny, though, that we're in a position now where fans are like, wow, missing J.D. Bertrand and D.J. Brown is really hurting the defense, because if you had said that last year, I think you would have gotten a much different response.
Yeah, and I think that maybe this is illuminating to fans that, oh, you know what? Maybe Jalen Snead isn't ready to be a full-time starter yet.
Yeah.
And I know that Jack Kaiser led the team in tackles on Saturday. I didn't think he played very well, to be honest with you. I thought he had one of his just kind of an off day. There were a couple plays. One crossing route comes to mind where I just thought he played it really poorly, didn't diagnose it as quickly as probably J.D. Bertrand would have had, and you just can't have him as the full-time Mike.
Yeah, the good thing is we found out from Marcus Freeman on Monday that J.D. Bertrand is going to play this weekend. D.J. Brown is going to play this weekend. Gabe Rubio is expected to play this weekend as well. Eli Raridan, the tight end, is not expected to play. Am I missing someone?
Did you say Mitchell Evans?
Oh, I did not say Mitchell Evans. It seems his status is still maybe a little uncertain. He's dealing with a concussion, but I think he's listed as probable right now.
Yeah.
Either way, Notre Dame is expected to be back and playing healthier this weekend against Ohio State, which, as we saw last week, is very important. All right. I feel like it's mandatory to say this. You did not have to experience the Peacock thing. I did, and not surprisingly, it sucked again.
Mm-hmm.
The most frustrating thing about it is it's never going to get better because Peacock really has no incentive to make it better. The only people tuning into these games are diehard fans, and they will tune in literally no matter what. And Peacock was able to organize some sort of agreement with NBC, although NBC owns Peacock, obviously. So every team, like now that the NBC has partnership with the Big Ten, all the top Big Ten teams have to play games on Peacock as well. This is no longer just a Notre Dame thing. But either way, Peacock is going to get their subscriptions from those fan bases because these people are going to tune in. And they just kind of look at it as they don't really have to make it better. And it sucks for the fans because we have no choice but to deal with it. But yeah, it felt like obligatory to point it out because it was really bad. There was a point during the game where it just went completely black on my screen and then went to a commercial on a third down play. And I was like, what is happening right now? And then it came back and it was obviously delayed, which of course is going to happen. Like, I do not look at Twitter when you're watching a game on Peacock because the tweets will be like a full 2 or 3 minutes ahead of what's happening on the screen. So it was another Peacock game. It sucked. It's going to suck next year. And that'll just be the case every single year from here on out.
Yeah, you're not the only person I heard that from. I heard from people in New York that it was constantly cutting out on them. I heard from people watching at bars in Chicago that said bars who had Peacock couldn't figure out how to get the sound to work on it too. So they got to clean that up. That's all I'll say.
Next up, and I'm sure you have some thoughts on this because it happened right in front of you. I really did not like the fact that Central Michigan tried to hurt Sam Hartman not once but twice, and I actually missed the first one, but I want to talk about that second one first, the obvious one when Sam Hartman went down, his arms went up, yelling in pain when he got twisted up. And yes, I know that Rocco Spindler got blown off the ball in that moment and basically almost got pushed into Sam Hartman, but then once the guy had Hartman's leg, he turned and twisted it in a way that felt intentional and to me felt dirty. We are very fortunate that Sam Hartman was not seriously hurt on that play because it looked really bad in real time. And then I shared some pictures with you today from it. It looks really bad in the still images. Really close call. Didn't like that at all. And then earlier in the game, something I had missed, but a friend of the program, Greg Flamung, had pointed out, there was a play earlier where Central Michigan linebacker Dakota Cochran chased down Hartman as he was rolling out of the pocket and then tackled him low and then sort of pushed down on his ankle. It's like, what are you doing, Central Michigan? This game is over. You're not going to win, and now you're going to try to take out the starting quarterback. I don't know. I just thought it was Bush League, and it was clear that Sam Hartman was pissed off and tired of that sort of play from Central Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, that was a problem across college football this weekend, right? Where you have the scumbag from Colorado State taking a cheap shot at Travis Hunter, too. But yeah, I mean, Central Michigan, like, who do you think you are? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? You're going to go back to the bars in Mount Pleasant and be like, oh, I took out Notre Dame's starting quarterback. I twisted his knee. You're a fucking loser, dude. Like, come on. It was stupid.
At least it's Colorado State's case. Like the game was in hand, and it was sort of a chippy game.
A rivalry game.
I'm not
like,
even defending
whatever.
it, but it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like that's going to be a little bit chippy. But this game is a blowout, and the game was over before it even started. Like, you're really doing that, dude? Come on.
Yeah. That also leads me to my last point, and I don't want to make this a thing every week, and this is not my only point here. It was a very sloppy performance. I'm going to say playing wise, sounds like the broadcast wise, and of course we cannot leave the officials out of this either. There were definitely, I mean, like I said, Notre Dame had 8 penalties, and like the offsides, those have just got to stop. I am sick of those. It's just a lack of focus, a lack of discipline. I don't know what's going on, but my God, this was one of the worst performances by an officiating crew I've seen in a long time. They had to discuss every play with each other. They had no conviction whatsoever, no confidence. I hope they got just absolutely chewed out by the ACC after this. They picked up 2 flags for Central Michigan. One was a blatant pass interference. The other, the guy's 15 yards downfield on an illegal man downfield, and they picked that up too. The late hit on Josh Burnham, like I mentioned, I mean, the guy just fell. Again, the pass interference on Jaden Mickey, the guy just fell in the end zone too. Like it's unbelievable. And then the one that takes the cake that I had never seen before was Audric Estime on a 3rd down. He was well short on this play. They gave him the first down. They decide to review it, and they come out and say, after review, the play stands. And then they review it again. I have never seen that before. I really want to know what happened on that. I don't think we got any explanation. And the point is, we've had awful refs the last 3 weeks, really, and this is eventually going to cost Notre Dame a game if this keeps up. It's just been that bad, and I don't know what the nature of this relationship is, but one of these days, Marcus Freeman just needs to rip these guys in a press conference, and I don't know when that's going to come. I was thinking about this, like, can the ACC even fine him? I don't know that they can, because it's not. Like there was a great Mike Bray rant in Tallahassee a couple of years ago where he was talking about how the league was screwing him and stuff like that. Marcus should be able to say that, and I don't know if they have the jurisdiction over him to fine him because we're not a full member.
I don't know if you saw this at the end of the first half. He was letting the officials have it. I don't know if it was about a specific call, but just the way that the first half went down, like you said, they had no conviction about any call that they made. They were picking up some. They just were so just out of sorts. And I know that some people were pretty down on the broadcast Saturday, and I get that. But I will give credit to Jason Garrett and Jack Collinsworth because they did make some comments. They're like, it's sure taking them a long time to discuss these calls today, is it? And they're like, yes, you are, on every single one. So they did point that out. And I think on that play with Estime, it was so obvious that he was short. And when they called the play, when they said the play stands, they immediately brought in the rules expert. I forgot the guy's name, but he was like, this is egregious. Like, they can't possibly let this happen. And I think maybe someone got in their ear and was like, what are you guys doing? That's not even close. And then they did fix it. It was just a really sloppy game overall. But the good thing is, it's over. Luke and I have plenty more to get to about the upcoming game against Ohio State, but I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you about Jase Medical, one of our new sponsors here at Locked On Irish. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand, and it's simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. And the last thing that I didn't like is that Notre Dame didn't play Ohio State last week, because it would have been great if Notre Dame had played Ohio State last Saturday instead of this upcoming one. And this is selfish as a fan. The college football slate this Saturday is absurd. There are 6 ranked matchups. There are marquee games at every window throughout the day. And as you and I have talked about before, the worst thing about going to a night game is that it's really hard to watch all the other college football that's happening during the day. And there is so much good college football. It would have been so much better if we were at the game last week and Notre Dame was playing Ohio State when there was literally no other good games on the slate up until, a couple of top teams had some close calls and then that Colorado State game late at night. But it would have been a lot better as fans if Notre Dame was playing Ohio State last weekend instead of this one when there's just so much good football happening.
Yeah, and I just have a feeling I'm going to be so locked in on and probably nervous about that game that I'm just not even going to be paying attention. You can't get service on your phone anyways to check what the score is in these games. So you're right. I will be very much in the dark on what's going on elsewhere.
All right.
And also, actually, that's a complaint I have. They don't show the scores of other games in the stadium at all. They're doing all this stupid in-game entertainment. Like, show me the other scores across the country. I want to know what's going on in those games. They're just showing some idiot in the stands with his shirt off, basically.
I thought that was a huge hit in the crowd.
I mean, it was kind of cool. It was kind of cool. But, like, still, show me the scores.
I remember when they used to show the scores back before the Canvas Crossroads project, and like the crowd would get hyped. They'd react to the scores on the screen and it'd be like, oh, Ohio State's losing, and the whole crowd would cheer. But I think that's a good segue into the Ohio State game because we're still several days away. We're taping this on a Monday. But how are you feeling about the game now that we're getting much closer day by day?
Look, I feel pretty good right now. I mean, I'm not going to come out there and say that I feel overly confident about it, but I just kind of have the same feeling I've had about this for months now that we're just kind of due to win this game. I think we have the better team, and we certainly have the better quarterback, and I just can't wait for it to get here. It's kind of a hectic week this week, but I think that's a good thing. So it'll keep me distracted. Otherwise, I don't know what else I would not get much done this week unless I had to, and fortunately, I do have to.
Okay, good. That'll keep you honest. I feel good. I'm sure that by the time the game comes around, I'm going to be incredibly nervous, but also very excited. These games just don't come around that often. Like, obviously, every year you've got your big games on the schedule, but a situation like this, when it's a top 10 game, Notre Dame and Ohio State, two teams who don't play each other that often, but there's a lot of animosity between the fan bases. It doesn't happen, and then it's happening at Notre Dame Stadium, and Notre Dame actually has not hosted a lot of games like this in that stadium for whatever reason over the past, decade plus, honestly. So this game just feels different. There's way more juice this game than some of the other big games in the past, and I can't wait, man. But something that I've been thinking about really all season long, would this be the biggest win of our lifetimes if Notre Dame is able to pull it off?
See, it's so hard to say on September 23rd, because I know Ohio State scored a lot of points last week, and yeah, I think they're probably a pretty good team, but say Notre Dame beats them and then Ohio State loses to Penn State and Michigan that year, like this year as well. Is that really that big of a win? I mean, there's probably a bunch of 18-year-olds in Austin right now who are calling that win last week the biggest win of their Texas fandom lives, but maybe Alabama sucks. So I that's kind of the point, is that it's probably in the moment. Yeah. But will that travel? That's something that's just kind of too hard to predict.
That's true. It is. It's so early on in the season, but still the fact that they are top 10 and the fact that it's Ohio State does make this game feel just ultra important, not just for the season, but for the program and the reputation nationally, what it means for recruits. I just think there's so much on the line in this game. Plus the fact that Freeman went there. I'm glad that storyline is sort of taking a step back. It's not nearly as prominent as it was last year. It got just annoying, I'm sure, for him because it got annoying for us as well. So there's so much at stake in this game that goes beyond just what happens on Saturday that I can't wait for it. And I feel like if they do pull it off and they win on Saturday, in that moment, it will probably feel like the biggest win of our lifetimes because for the listeners out there, I was born in 96. You were born in 97, right?
Yep.
When I think of the biggest wins of my lifetime, I would think 2012 Oklahoma always comes to mind when they beat USC in that same season, even though USC wasn't that good, just clinching a spot in the national championship. Now, give me some other ones. What am I missing here? Clemson in 2020, obviously, although they didn't have Trevor Lawrence. There hasn't been that many wins.
2002 Florida State.
That was a throwback.
2000. 17 USC maybe. Like I don't know.
But
I don't even really put last year's, even though as cool of a moment it was, I don't really put last year's Clemson game in that just because it was a whooping and like it almost made it anticlimactic as fun as it was, but it was just, it didn't even feel that big. And also Drew Pine was a quarterback. So,
and as we found out not that long after, that Clemson team was not all that great.
Correct.
You could argue that maybe that game, depending on what happens with Clemson, maybe that game ended the Clemson dynasty because Clemsoning ended when they beat Notre Dame way back in 2015. Maybe we got them back.
Full circle. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But there's plenty more to talk about with the Ohio State game this week, and we will definitely do that here on the podcast. But Luke, thanks for coming on as always, and I'll see you in a few days.
Yeah, sounds good. Can't wait.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Irish. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. Right now, I'm planning on having a Buckeye come on tomorrow's episode to preview the game on Saturday. Some of you might recognize the name because he's actually been on the show before, so be on the lookout for that. Of course, the easiest way to stay up to date on everything we're doing here on the podcast is to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Irish, on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod, and my personal Twitter account at Tyler, WOJCIAK. I'll see you guys tomorrow.